Hey everybody, it's Jason with Parallel Reality coming back with you today with an article from The Federalist dated October 23rd. It says, American heritage is no myth. It's the source of our liberty and peace. I don't think I've ever seen this picture right here before. It's pretty cool. Anyway, let's keep going. It says, a shared American identity and cultural heritage isn't some nativist delusion. It's the only reason we're not a collection of warring tribes. Says the most important debate in America today is not about immigration policy, but about what it means to be an American. Our immigration debate is, of course, a proxy for that. It's easier to argue over asylum policy or ICE enforcement protocols than it is to tackle the fraught question of who is an American and who isn't, who really belongs here and who doesn't. At the heart of this debate are competing historical narratives about our heritage. On the right, there's a growing willingness to argue straightforwardly and unapologetically that America isn't just a creed or a proposition, but a nation with a shared history and culture. Vice President J.D. Vance endorsed this view last year in his acceptance speech at the Republican National Convention. America is not just an idea, he said. It is a group of people with a shared history and a common future. It is, in short, a nation. To truly be an American, in this view, means embracing an Anglo-American and Christian inheritance and insisting on certain Western cultural norms. It means rejecting multiculturalism in favor of our founding Anglo-American culture, with the understanding that preserving this cultural base is the only way to ensure liberty and dignity for all American citizens, regardless of national origin. By contrast, the liberal narrative foisted on us aggressively for the past 40 years is that if being an American means anything, it should mean apologizing for your nation's history, repudiating its Anglo-American inheritance, and celebrating non-Western cultures while allowing unlimited immigration from every corner of the globe. His resistance to that narrative is growing. The phrase heritage American, which I've seen come out, and I think it's actually kind of funny, is now embraced by some quarters of the right that rightly think someone whose ancestors fought in the Civil War is more American than someone who just arrived here from a foreign country. I would 100% agree with that. So the left understands that right's newfound confidence in asserting an American heritage and identity is a direct threat to multiculturalism. Multiculturalism, there we go. Or it just says multiculturalism. Okay. I read that wrong, so I actually said it right the first time, I think. So, anyway, it says, to fight back, some liberals are taking direct aim at the entire concept of American heritage, deriding it as nativist and racist, of course, because they have no other argument. In a recent article in the New York Times by Leighton Woodhouse, argues that the notion of a shared American identity traceable to the colonial era is historically delusional. It says the founding fathers were an assortment of people from different histories and backgrounds who coexisted, often just barely, because they didn't have any other choice but to do so. To back up this bizarre claim, which the founders themselves rejected, Woodhouse cites various conflicts between Puritans, Quakers, Anglicans, and Presbyterians, as if relatively minor disagreements between these different Christian groups in the colonial era is qualitatively the same as unresolvable religious conflicts between Muslims and Christians, or cultural differences between American evangelicals and Pakistani Hindus. Says it's a ridiculous claim, but the tactic here is to argue that relatively tiny fissures between different Christian denominations means there was no such thing as Christian civilization to begin with, and certainly no Anglo-American identity in the colonial period that was recognizably Christian. And because all of that is historically delusional, as Woodhouse says, we should accept unlimited immigration from totally alien cultures and make multiculturalism the basis of American identity in the 21st century. Says this is a distortion of the past for the purpose of flattening the present. All cultural distinctness in the colonial era, from Quakers of Pennsylvania to the Puritans of New England to the Cavaliers of Virginia and South Carolina, is disingenuously put forward as evidence of a fractured cultural landscape in the English colonies, devoid of any cohesion around Christian identity or cultural norms. The virtue signaling of the Quakers with their plain clothes, or the stubborn insistence of Lutheran immigrants on German-speaking ministers, is no different from second- and third-generation young Americans today celebrating their Mexican, Korean, Somalian, or other ancestry, says Woodhouse. It's the kind of argument that sounds plausible in theory until someone actually tries to make it, at which point it sounds preposterous. Does anyone really believe that Minnesota's unassimilated Somali immigrant population today is no different than the Lutheran Germans that settled in Minnesota in the mid-19th century simply because those first-wave Lutherans persisted for a time in speaking German? Yeah, those two things don't seem very close to being related at all. So the only reason to torture history like this is to degrade and ultimately destroy our Anglo-American inheritance. Woodhouse does it in the sophisticated version for the times, but it's basically the same thing as Mehdi Hasan's crude assertion recently that Muslim slaves built America, which serves as the basis for his claim that if Christians are allowed to have their church bells, then Muslims should be allowed to blast their call to prayer throughout neighborhoods at all hours of the night. And no, and also Mehdi Hasan is just a moron. He's like king moron. But what Woodhouse and Hasan don't seem to get is that the embrace of an Anglo-American cultural identity isn't just for the white descendants of European colonists, it's for every American citizen, especially for those outside the Anglo-American inheritance. Absent that inheritance, there's no way for Americans from all walks of life to get together in peace and dignity. Without it, we will be left with nothing but warring tribes and competing cultural identities. Arguably, those who come to our country from alien cultures have the most to gain by America's embrace of its Western cultural heritage. It's the one thing that will protect them from the end state of true multiculturalism, which is the extermination of one tribe by another, the unending cycle of clan violence that still defines much of the non-Western world. It hardly needs to be said that in such societies, the only thing that keeps sectarian violence at bay is the heavy hand of the state, which is in order to maintain peace, cannot allow liberty. So the genius of our American, and I skipped too far, the genius of our American nation is that we figured out how to maintain both peace and liberty. Says we didn't do that thanks to some form of proto-multiculturalism, but thanks to the civilizational inheritance we received from our English fathers in Christian Europe. Only by preserving that inheritance can America continue to be a land of peace and liberty for all those who come here and make it their home. Yeah, nothing wrong with that. I think that's totally fine. But yeah, to argue like people that just are basically fresh off the boat are somehow the same as people that have been here for a couple centuries or something like that is ridiculous. And if you want to see ridiculous, go look up what Mehdi Hasan, and besides that, go link to the article below and go to the link that was attached by his name and see what he said. I mean, it's just, there's probably no human being on earth I dislike more than Mehdi Hasan. Just an absolute ridiculous clown of a person. But anyway, before I go off on a tangent, let me know what you think about this in the comments below. Please like, share, and subscribe, and I will talk to you soon. Bye.